I guess like especially if it's English speaking, because there's more people who are trying to get big, maybe they're like a little bit more flexible with like negotiating like the rates, right? Like it's not like
But also English-speaking people are in English-speaking countries, which usually charge more.
oh the base is higher.
Yeah.
Like so like the base amount is higher
Yeah.
regardless. Okay.
Yes.
But then if they get big, are they charging triple or is it more of like oh like 50, 60, 70%? Like is like do they charge as much as like they like the bigger they get the more they charge? Is it like as extreme as like Russian social?
I don't know, really. I would suggest, because why not?
Uh-huh.
Like, because if you are, so the thing is, when you become popular,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people, a lot of companies want to
Like
use you
yeah,
for
as a
advertisement
platform,
as a
yeah.
platform, so you start charging more.
Oh,
And
okay.
so because there is competition for you, like
Mm.
between other companies to
Right,
promote
right.
their product, so you can charge more.
Mm.
And it just becomes unsustainable at certain
Oh, I
point
see, I see. Yeah.
for the company. So I mean, for if you calculate money, so some companies like Coca, yeah, it looks like it works.
I think mine is good.
Like Coca-Cola doesn't
Just like
care. They have so
to the
much
mic or
money
something.
that
yeah, yeah,
they
yeah.
don't count that.
Yeah.
But if you are actually calculating if it's worth it,
Mm-hmm.
not really.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Mm.
But again, depending on your goal. Our goal was not just to have a promotion with them, but also have an asset that we can promote in user acquisition later
Mm.
on our own.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of also include the price that it would take to create this video, like
Mm-hmm.
without an influencer,
Mm.
because it will still cost money, right?
Right, but
And
then
they will do it for free. I mean, not for free, but basically they create it and publish it on their platform.
right,
So
but it's not like you're not like adding in the
yes,
influencer as an additional cost.
yes. So
Oh, okay.
you kind of balance between that. So even if it's a expensive influencer, maybe they still will create you a very good asset
Mm.
that will still be cheaper than create the asset on its own, or
Right,
not
right.
very much more expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, so you got like run all the projections, run the numbers and stuff. Yeah. Okay. Hmm.
I've been talking the whole day today. I can't talk enough.
We'll see what we can do to lighten the load.
We're good? We're good.
Good.
All right, good evening, everyone. How's everybody finding Trine Gaming Expo so far? Yeah, looking good. All right. So today we have something super exciting. Welcome to TGEX's Technology at Riot Games panel. So today we have an exciting opportunity to learn more about a career in tech and gaming. Everyone, please welcome our industry panelists from Riot Games. So my name's Hugh.
And I'm Owen. I'm a third year computer engineering major, and
I'm a fourth-year computer engineering major.
all right. So let's just start with introductions. Could each of you guys introduce yourselves and talk about briefly a little bit about what you do at Riot?
I guess I'll start as the closest one. My name is Andrew. I work as an analyst in Central Tech team. What I do is help the Central Tech team to understand, to make decisions about which direction in terms of technology do we take. Like, for example, I work a lot with anti-cheat. I work a lot with our DevOps team that handles our incidents and outages with the servers. I also make market research about should we support ARM processors and like a lot of different things. Oh, it started working differently. But yeah, there's just a very wide scope of work that I do.
Hello, everyone. Okay. I'm Brian. I work in the Central Compliance and Release team as a compliance QA analyst. And
It works?
okay. And essentially, for Riot Games is games that want to publish on consoles like such as Xbox and PlayStation, where they're to ensure that any title, such as Valorant console, for example, is compliant with first-party standards, requirements, and there's just a lot of documents reading. There's a lot of communication with multiple game teams, though, so you get really a lot of fingers in different pies when it comes to a title's kind of development and production process.
I'm Nikki. I'm a release manager. I'm also in Central Compliance and Release. We're kind of on sister teams. So I kind of heard a lot of cats. I work with first party, so Sony and Microsoft. We communicate with them to push builds through the first party certification processes. In order to be put onto console, you have to submit your build, and it has to go through the checks as he was stating. So we flag any potential risks that Sony and Microsoft may find that may pose a problem to our release schedule. We also work with producers, content producers, so all the storefronts where you get Val Console on Xbox and on PlayStation. We set up all that metadata as well as the assets, and we push the button for patches to go live. We work with other teams like Player Platform and whatnot to set up pricing and region availability. It's really kind of like a mixed bag.
Hi guys, I'm Kayla. I'm a software engineer on League Data Central. So what that means is my team supports various data-driven products in both League and TFT. So if you've ever played League and used the item recommender, that's my team. Room recommender, very similar. My personal favorite though is we also help out with things like your shop. We help select your skins. So if they're great, that was us. If they're bad, please forget I said that.
Right, thank you so much for the introductions. So on to some questions to each and every one of you. As we know, breaking into the tech and gaming industry can be quite challenging. I'm sure many people in our audience can relate, myself included. So could each of you share a bit about your educational background and your early career experiences? And how did these steps lead you into a job at Riot Games? Starting from Andrew.
Let's go the other way around.
Going in, yeah.
All right, so I am a UC Berkeley grad, class of 2023, and I don't really have that many early career experiences because this is my first full-time job. I started at Riot as an intern in the class of 2022 on the same team, but actually as a data engineer, so working with things like SQL and Python to help build our data pipelines and make sure that we get all the important data we need to keep the games balanced. I would say the biggest things in at least my educational background that helped were obviously, coding languages, very helpful as a software engineer. But learning to problem solve is probably one of the biggest things you can learn. Obviously, you won't know every programming language going into things, but if you can learn sort of the engineering building blocks and get really comfortable with those, you can pick up languages a lot more quickly. So like I remember in my intern technical interview, I was asked to do something in SQL, and I had not worked with SQL at all, like only a tiny bit. And so as long as you have the understanding of how things would work, you can kind of learn the language as you go. And that's, I would say, the biggest skill that helped me along the way was understanding the building blocks and putting those together to really understand engineering in a way that's completely like dialect and language not specific.
Mine was very non-linear. I went to Purdue and graduated in 2011 with I have a bachelor's in English literature and a minor in medieval and Renaissance studies. Wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, and ended up following my boyfriend at the time, who was military, to Okinawa, where I got into video game journalism and anime journalism. Stayed there for 4 years, kind of ended up networking through Tokyo Game Show, and then moved back stateside, which is how I got to California. he was stationed at Merino Valley. So from there, I continued to network at things like E3, San Diego Comic-Con. I went to a lot of events. And once I separated from him, I kind of got my foot in the door at Sega, well, Atlas, and then the merger happened with Sega, doing localization QA, where my English degree was a huge asset as I was QAing the English translations for, before anyone else would see them. And after 3 years of doing that, I really wanted to make a bigger mark and move up. But I could not do that at Sega, so I kind of threw my resume around and I got hired at 505 Games, where I learned how to do submissions and first-party certification. I also learned how to submit to major age ratings boards like the ESRB and PEGI. I wasn't even there for a year. I was at a PlayStation conference, and it's a specific conference just for that very niche job. And I met my current manager there, and they had an opening at Riot, and that's how I got to Riot. I would say perseverance. I got a lot of no's, so just keep putting in your resume, and eventually someone will say yes.
To a quick add too, I got rejected from Riot twice, the Riot internship. So yeah, perseverance is huge.
As for my early background, I was, UCSD alumni, class of 2019, International Business, go Rady, and then COVID happened. Well, no, hang on. I take that back. I graduated, and then I got into, and then I did a 2-year master's degree at this School of Global Policy and Strategy over by ERC for 2 years. COVID happened in the middle of that. And essentially, I was gonna, my initial career prospects were to go into state or federal government related jobs, international relations. But the entire time, I've also largely grown up on video games. So it was one of those things where post-COVID, job pickings were, at least in that sector, was kind of slim, especially with travel restrictions and whatnot. And so for me, I think I actually just kind of blind fire applied to Sony. They have a studio and kind of QA testing office up in Sereno Valley, and I was able to get that job. Initially, I applied for functional QA, which is what you would think of when you think of video game QA. Play the game 8 hours a day, try to break it, write any bugs you find out. But I think, I don't know how much of this contributed to it, but I think my background in business and management required me to go through a lot of documents, being able to break it down, being able to translate it, and essentially transfer it over to a different party, whether that's a manager or making it digestible. And that really helped with compliance, which is very documentation heavy. So I ended up being poached from functional to compliance, and that was where I worked for 3 years on titles such as most of the recent MLB The Show titles, God of War Ragnarok, Helldivers. There were some VR titles in there. I did also work on Conquered on the compliance QA end. We all know what happened to that. But essentially how I got to Riot was one of the former members of the team, an alumni from the Sony compliance team. They had joined Riot as a technical account manager. And at that point, they were also, I believe, looking for a compliance analyst, as Riot is, with Valorant console, pushing into the console space, Xbox, PlayStation, and through kind of, I reached out to that alumni, and he was able to put in a reference for me, and that's kind of how I got into Riot, along with my background in Sony compliance.
I was born in Russia, and I finished my university there, graduated there, and I always wanted to work at McKinsey, and I was going there, but at my 5th year, I think my first company called me, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to work in games?" It was a mobile game company. I'm like, "Yeah, sure, why not? At least for a year while I'm still in the university." And I kind of stayed there for 3 years. After that, my friend, who was a huge League of Legends fan, he said, hey, there is an opening in Moscow Riot office as an analytics manager. Do you want to try? I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? And I tried, and I got the job, but I didn't get the analytics manager job because I didn't have an experience as a manager. And they changed the position to just analyst for me, and they just decided not to hire a manager at all. I'm like, okay, that works for me. Then 5.5 years I worked there in Moscow office. And there was COVID, so I couldn't transfer anywhere, so I kind of wanted to. And when the COVID restrictions started to go down, I started applying in, so even if you are within Riot, internationally, you still have to apply to different jobs if you want to get there. So I started applying different jobs in Singapore, in China, in the US, and I got rejected in Singapore and Hong Kong. But then my friend, who I knew at Riot, he started to create his own team, and he's like, yeah, do you want to join? I'm like, yeah, sure. So I'm here because I have friends. Yeah, that's how I got into Riot, and now been here for 3 years. I'm very excited.
Very cool, thank you. All right, so the gaming and tech industry is known for being very fast-paced and dynamic. What would you say were some of the biggest challenges that you faced, technical or non-technical, throughout your career, and how have you overcome them? We can start with Andrew.
Yeah. I think the biggest challenge is to, as you said, it's very fast-paced, and to know which technology do you want to use and you don't want to use. For example, last year, or not even last year, or this year, ARM is becoming a very big platform, and there is a question do we want as a game company to support it natively, or AI is a very hot topic right now, and everybody is trying to use AI in all of their products. And at Riot, we are more cautious about it. Do we want to use AI everywhere? Do we really need it in our games? So, yeah, I think the big challenge is to differentiate what is just a hot topic and what is actually good for all players.
Yeah, kind of to springboard off of Andrew's point, the gaming industry is always changing. There's always new trends that are rising, new trends that are, everyone's trying to follow. Also trends that are kind of slowly aging out as well, but maybe, certain parties haven't, necessarily picked up on that, and they're still trying to chase that. I think for me, speaking from experience, one of the biggest challenges, I think, is kind of how, two things for me. One thing is kind of how some knowledge can be kind of obscured. Whether that be to kind of maintain a competitive edge in the industry, or if it's just certain processes that are very involved that one publisher might not want another to know, but then that does end up creating a lot of confusion for developers, and sometimes that also translates to the players as well, as why are there kind of things that might be good to know about that we don't know about. Another kind of challenge I would say is it is a very competitive industry, right? Because in a positive spin on this, most people who work in the video game industry are very passionate about video games, right? Because we love video games. But it is one of those things where that's what drives a lot of people to do very well and to push themselves and continue to grow. So a lot of times it's, when you're applying for that job, there are probably also a lot of people who are also just as passionate, or they perhaps bring something different to the table. And so, that's just, it's always an ongoing process to continually do what you can to learn more, do what you can to kind of make yourself stand out. But also just doing what you can to just network with people, getting to know them. And yeah, that's never like that's a road, not a destination. Like even if in the industry, like I'm still trying to make sure that I'm like keeping in touch with people, establishing new connections, and so on.
On the non-technical side, I would just say probably keep applying, because after you get no's, you kind of don't feel good about that. So even when you do have the job, you're always going to be frustrated in some way. So just keep advocating for yourself, I think, is probably how I keep going. So that way I know I'm doing the best that I can and doing everything I can to my full ability. Yeah, non-technical.
I would say for me, one of the biggest challenges that I've been through is some of you may have noticed. I said I was a data engineering intern, but I am now a software engineer. So I did actually change my title from data engineer to software engineer because when I returned full time from my internship, they did not have headcount for a software engineer, but I could be a data engineer. And I was like, yeah, I want to work at Riot. I'll take the data engineer position. My God. Um, and so over the first year, I've been at Riot just about 2 years now. Over the first year, I worked primarily as a data engineer, but I also had to sort of start learning how software engineering works at Riot, all while doing, my regular day job. And so a big part of that meant, talking to my manager and advocating for myself and making sure I could take on projects that could show off software engineering skills, even if they were maybe more of a data engineering project. So self-advocation is really huge. A lot of people want to help you, but they can't help you unless you tell them what you need and what you're trying to do. And so setting those goals and saying, hey, can you help me reach my goal, is honestly kind of scary, but I would say is one of the best skills I learned, and like overcoming the challenge and being courageous enough to say, this is what I really want, can you help me get there, was what made it happen.
Yeah, I kind of want to add that one of the biggest challenges was also to change the mindset that I can do everything to we can do everything. If I ask for help, if I say that I don't know it and that, or I need help, because before in the university they're like, oh, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to be the best. I mean, you still have to be the best, but there are a lot of other smart people that can actually help, and asking for help is very important.
I just had a quick question to Nikki specifically. So you mentioned on the non-technical side, you found persevering to be really important, especially when it comes to applying to jobs. It's really just a numbers game. I was wondering if you could expand more on like maybe some mindset tips you had to like make sure you don't give up. Like kind of a vague question, but I was kind of curious about your perspective on that.
Yeah. I would say definitely if you're upset, be upset for a bit. I have gotten better about it over the years. Obviously, like when I was younger, I probably didn't use like the healthiest coping mechanisms, but now I try to not distract per se, but take like a walk or play a game, watch something on TV, and then come back to it, or vent to friends. That always helps, and get second opinions, so that way you're not just in your head thinking about it in an echo chamber and then, self-doubting.
So taking care of yourself, really important.
Yeah, don't be afraid to have a good cry. I definitely did some online assessments, and I would finish it and I'd be like, well, I failed, and I would cry and I would call my brother.
Also, guys also cry.
Yes. Thank you for that. So on to the next question. Technology is always evolving, with the rise of large language models like ChatGPT, Claude for software engineering. I was wondering, how do you guys stay up to date with the latest technological advancements and trends in the gaming and tech industry?
I think for me the biggest thing is talking to people. A lot of people are really passionate about a lot of different things, and I wouldn't say I necessarily have knowledge of everything, but there might be one thing that I know, and I can share So just talking to people, hearing what they're really interested about, whether it be, going to a conference and talking to people here at the Gaming Expo, talking to people at GDC, talking to people at work. There are so many really smart people out there that across all of them have way more knowledge than I have myself. So not being afraid to ask questions and learn from those people and learn what's this really cool thing you learned today, I would say is one of my biggest strengths, where just talk to people, just network, just say, hey, what do you think is interesting? Honestly makes a really big difference because you can learn a lot more from a wider net than you could ever learn just by yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like a lot of us also just social media, like YouTube. I find out a lot of things through Reddit and YouTube, and talking to other people, going to conferences, like going to GDC, seeing cool talks, TED Talks, stuff like that, and getting your knowledge from like a diverse set of sources.
Yeah, I'll kind of echo the points made earlier. Yeah, just making sure, or just on YouTube, there's a lot of content creators out there that are every week or like even daily just putting out videos for what's new in the gaming industry. I mean, sometimes you do want to make sure that like you're kind of, to Nikki's point, you want to get like a diverse kind of set of voices, because sometimes certain creators might have certain biases towards certain companies or certain genres of games, and you want to make sure you have like a lot of voices, so you can kind of think in an analytical way about like how what's the next big thing in the industry, or what might be kind of being hyped up but not all that it's expected to be. I think one more thing too is a lot of times when you see people talking about new technologies, I think back to something that one of my business professors mentioned. Every solution introduces new problems. So it's one of those things where we have a lot of, as relatively young as the gaming industry is in terms of like it being mainstream, there's still a lot of historical data to work with. So in a way, if you can kind of adopt a mindset of like, okay, what worked, what didn't, what trends have we seen, how can we apply that to what we're seeing now? Kind of, so like with AI and LLMs, there's not one single way to implement that in projects across the gaming industry. So there's gonna be some that work, there's gonna be some that don't. The key then, I think, is to learn from that and say, okay, like, how did this work well in this context? What are the lessons we can take away from that? Yeah, that would be my answer.
I would double down on social networks. I think you definitely should find something that you like to read. There's definitely plenty of those. And as a bilingual, I can say, like, definitely if you know other language, go and check the social networks in other language, because they bring different perspective and different tools, basically different school. Like, for example, the big difference is companies here in the US, they have a lot of money, so they can buy solution to their problems. But companies in Russia don't have so much money, so they have to come up with the creative solutions for the same problems. Not necessarily better solutions, but like still it brings different perspectives. So I read both English and Russian media. Other thing is, now that we have ChatGPT, this is my best friend. I talk to it every time I don't know anything. I'm like, oh, this is a new word I never heard about, new technology I never heard about, let's talk about it. And explain me like I'm 5. I go, and every time it mentions something new that I don't know, I'm okay, what's this? I'm super dumb, like, explain me this. So this was also a very good source. And the third source for me is, I guess I got lucky, and my hobby is software engineering. So I make games and services for my own at home too. So I have to learn the new technologies and like know what's actually people are using right now, what's the simplest thing to use. So that also helps a lot. So if you have any hobby that is technical related, that should help you a lot.
Thank you. ChatGPT for the win.
Yeah. Yes.
So on to the next question. For students who want to follow in your footsteps, what would you say are like the key skills or knowledge areas that they should focus on when they're in college?
I will say for an analyst, because I'm usually, so I'm an analyst and I'm hiring analysts. So what I'm usually looking for is not for a specific knowledge of something. Like I don't care if person knows something, but looking for understanding of some concepts. So if they if they forgot some function in Python, if they forgot like something, I kind of don't care, because nowadays you can look up everything online, and Google or ChatGPT can do those things for you. But what is very important is to know how to use different tools and to know how to use different technologies. So the basic understanding, or understanding how to do this, and really what I'm looking for in different people. And math is also very important, in both in engineering and in analytics world. So understanding of math and how to solve real life problems with math, that helps a lot. I mean, sometimes you don't need very like deep math, but some basic knowledge, understanding the principles, so you can find out later some white paper, so you can understand it. There's a question, but I guess we have a special.
Yeah, we'll have like a Q&A after.
All right, so in terms of skills or knowledge to develop during college, I would say with regards to compliance QA, a lot of it is things that you can learn. It definitely helps if you're able to parse through a lot of document-based knowledge and being able to translate that into digestible kind of information and passing that along. But I wouldn't say there's any like specific classes or pursuits that you need to follow to do that. I would say I would more advocate for soft skills such as networking, being able to talk to people, being able to kind of ask questions, not just like what something is, but like why, like what's the end goal, what's the overarching goal. Because I guess from a QA perspective, whether that's functional or compliance, at the end of the day, the focus is to make sure that the end user, the player, the gamer, has the best experience, the most polished experience possible. So, whenever there's a feature, we have to be asking ourselves, like, how is this going to affect the end user experience? Kind of bridging that kind of gap of what the developer's vision for the game is versus how that will actually translate to the game experience. I think I don't have too much to add to that for the time being. I'll maybe think of something afterwards, but I'll pass it along.
No, I'm gonna one up on that. I also agree, communication and soft skills, because I do work with devs, and 90% of my job is soft skills, communicating ideas across multiple teams, as well as translating different lingo. One team may use a term a different way. First party, like Sony and Microsoft, their idea of a beta is different than Riot's idea of a beta. So you have to translate that language into something that's digestible for your audience. So you're constantly shifting languages per se, and slang and terms. So it's important that you're able to communicate succinctly and clearly, so that everybody on the team is on the same page. The knowledge can always be learned, but soft skills need to be practiced. So yeah.
I would say somewhat in that vein. I already mentioned, obviously, engineering principles when you're a software engineer, very important. But I would say one of my personal strongest strengths comes from one of my biggest weaknesses, which is I have a really bad memory, like real bad. I will forget things that I told you like last week. And so for me, my key skill has actually been note-taking. It's something that obviously helped me out in college. I don't know if y'all have cheat sheets on your final exams that you get to bring into the exam, and you can write super small. That was where I practiced. But to this day, especially when I'm working, I take a lot of notes, whether that be on, the project that I'm working on. I have to take note of like what the stakeholder things that we talked about and things that, like, I would definitely otherwise forget, is a huge skill, because I don't know about y'all, even if your memory is better than mine, there are things that maybe you want to reference that you did a year ago. And like, you might not have any recollection of that. But taking detailed notes that give you a good understanding of what happened at that time can be especially helpful when, for example, you work on a project that touches a similar technology and you took notes about how to use that. Or you're working on a project and previously you or someone else worked on a similar project. So taking notes and writing documentation and documenting your own work not only helps yourself, but really helps your team and really helps you make a good impression. So yeah, that would definitely be the biggest skill, and hopefully one that y'all are already practicing now.
I also want to add that I think in university it's very important to learn how to learn and do it fast, because everything changes all the time, and the thing that you knew a week ago is probably already outdated, and you need to learn something new again, and there is always new challenges coming, and you need to learn how to face them very fast.
I see, thank you. So communication skills, soft skills, learning how to learn, they're all foundational to succeeding. Thank you for that. So on to the second last question here. With how turbulent the tech and gaming industry is currently in this economy, how do you personally navigate these periods of uncertainty, and what strategies have helped you continue to succeed, even when the industry faces tough times? I'm sure.
I think it's kind of similar to our answer about rejection earlier. I obviously have been very lucky to have not been laid off. As you've heard, Riot's had layoffs in the past 2 years. But I have had a lot of friends who were, a lot of people who came in my intern class with me are no longer at Riot, and like, they were all very good at their job. And so I think the biggest thing to think of is like, there can be times that these things happen and it is not your fault. Sometimes it will be your fault. But but a lot of the time, like, the needs of the business can just change and you might not be needed anymore, and that is not your fault. And so I think like not taking it too hard and not taking it as like some failure on your part when it's not, because sometimes you can do everything right and it's just not enough.
Similarly, I think having a very supportive community in game dev has been great. So that way you can kind of see what's happening across the industry and everybody's going through it. But having that network there to support you, make sure that you kind of keep going, because they're going to push you and be like, hey, well, I've got an opening here. Why don't you come over here? So it's really great to build up those relationships with other people in the gaming industry, which leads back to, I think, like, networking is a really important skill to have. Networking in a sense where it's not just business, but you're forming long-standing friendships and relationships that will have people remember you. So that way when you are in these times, you have people that are like in your corner and will like lift you up.
Yeah, so anecdotally, plus one to that, definitely just controlling what you can control, because there are things that, business needs that, some director or someone way up higher on the hierarchy than you will make the decision with no input from you, and, you can't necessarily, you don't want to over worry about that. But yeah, big proponent of like staying curious, continue to ask questions, try to preserve, continue to preserve your passion. Like, if you want to get into the gaming industry or, whatever you're passionate about, continue to like ask questions, reach out to people. Because, speaking of layoffs, following the Sony PlayStation layoffs in March of last year, I was out of a job for 2 or 3 months. And then at last year's Riot production panel, I met Nikki. and a year later I'm working with her. I'm not saying that speaking to Nikki is like, I'm not, it's not like a coverall. I'm not saying like if you speak to us and you network with us, you're definitely gonna get jobs at Riot. But it's kind of, exactly, but there is kind of like, you're not trying to bank on like getting lucky and talking to someone, they offer you a job necessarily, but it's very much, getting to know them, know what they do, how does that, the impact and how, that shapes the gaming industry, you want to keep an open mind. And so I think that's something that I would very much, recommend that, you try to keep in mind. Yeah.
I want to add something on the emotional side, like what happens when there's a big problem or something happens, like you just go and cry. And that's it. Then you feel better the day later or maybe a week later, and then after that, a week later, you again go and cry because again, everything's bad. But in the end, something good still happens if you try and try. I think what I would say, if you do have a dream to work in a certain company, definitely pursue it. But it might happen that you might not get a job in the company of your dream, just because there's just too many people applying, or there's just no job there, or you just got unlucky. That also happens, and like maybe like the industry or what you're doing, because there are other companies, maybe there are smaller ones, but they're probably not worse, or maybe even better. And I have a lot of friends who were let go from different companies, but then they found something better all the time.
All right. I guess we'll just do like one more question and then open it up to the audience right after. Just keep it quick. It's like, so what's one piece of advice you wish you received when you were just trying to start your career? And start with Andrew.
Oh, that's a hard one.
I think
Because
I
we already.
can actually go if you want
Yeah,
to
you go.
think about it. I would say it's advice that I did actually receive when I was just starting my career, so I count myself very lucky in the timing that I received it. It was actually my mentor that I met through a gaming club at Berkeley, very similar to y'all's, who actually worked at Riot at the time, and I was really scared of asking her for any help. And I remember telling her that because she was like, I'm like here to mentor you, but you haven't like actually really like taken advantage of that. And I was like, yeah, I'm scared to ask you for things. And she told me, she was like, why? The worst thing I can say is no. Like, don't say no for me by not asking me. So that honestly was like super meaningful to me, because I really overthink things, and I'm thinking like, oh, well, I don't want to bother them, and I don't want to, come across as like needy, or I'm using them, or all of these things. The worst thing they can say is no. Let them say no, because there's a chance that they could still say yes. And honestly, most people that you build a connection with want to help you. They really do. People are actually overall really nice. Like, most people want to help you. And so don't take that chance away from them, because you're only hurting yourself.
In a similar vein as my last answer is networking. I think just getting comfortable talking to people and not thinking that we're somehow like so far away from you. We're just people, and we all like games. We all have similar interests. And so genuinely just coming up and talking to us about things that you love makes us remember you. I mean, there's definitely a right and a wrong way. Like, don't go up there and be like, look at my portfolio like right now. Just be super genuine, like introduce yourself, like what you like. And yeah, I highly recommend that. Because even if like it doesn't pan out now or whatever, like somebody will remember you, and maybe a spot will open up, and they'll be like, oh, I recall somebody that would definitely fit in this position. I mean, I'm from the Midwest, and we're just talkers in general, so it kind of comes naturally to me. But if it doesn't come naturally to you, I would highly recommend like getting used to it. Go to conferences and just start talking to people. And it'll come more naturally later.
Yes, again, similar point to Nikki. Sometimes it's just a matter of like going to events and just walking out the door. Because it was very much a case for me when I was in college. I'd be like, I don't really need to go to this thing. I can play another round of League of Legends, right? But it's one of those things, that I tell myself, and I've gotten a lot better about it, but I still work on it. Sometimes it's like, I should probably go to this event that's happening, once a month. I can always play League later. So sometimes it's just a matter of like, it's not like better time management. It's just more of like, there's an opportunity cost for like things you do, and it's really up to you to determine whether or not that's worth it. But sometimes like just getting out the door is really that first step you need to then that leads into like networking or like forming connections, or you see someone wearing like some niche apparel that like you also know about, and then boom, you start talking, and that might end up being like a really long-standing connection that you have. And yeah, that's the advice I would give to someone who's also breaking into the industry.
The advice that I would give myself, to my younger self, is not to be afraid to make mistakes. Because when you're already working, especially if it's your first work, when you make a mistake, you think that you'll be fired tomorrow because you did it. And I talked to different people, and I guess a lot of people share the same feeling or experience. But at least if you are working in a normal company, nobody's going to fire you for one mistake. Just own it and discuss it and start working to fix it. Because people make mistakes, and that happens all the time. At any level, the best engineers can make mistakes, and that's okay.
All right. So thank you for all these insightful answers and advice. We'd like to open the floor to questions from the audience now. So if our mic runner, if you guys could line up on the left side here, and Magnets there will be helping manage this.
Yeah, we can hear you.
You got that one.
All right, so my question is primarily directed at Kayla, but I guess all of you guys can answer as well. So what are specific, I know you talked about SQL and something that you kind of had to learn on the job and stuff like that, so I'm just wondering what other specific skills or items did you actually have to learn for where you are right now, I guess?
Yeah, I am in the process of learning C++. That is what the game engine is written in primarily on the engineering side for the League and TFT. And it's been a journey. I used C++ for one graphics class at school, but really wasn't enough to grasp everything in C++. And obviously, as I said, my memory is really bad. I've forgotten a lot from school. And so I kind of want to emphasize what Andrew said. Talking with ChatGPT is like a not mean Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow, if you ask a question or if your question's not there, you're kind of screwed. ChatGPT does a great job of explaining I'm 5, so there are times when I'm like, what does this particular keyword mean? I'm most comfortable in Python, so going to a very typed language is just very different experience. And my team is also the data team, so we do actually do about half of our work is in Python and SQL. That's the data side. But then anytime we have to jump into the game engine, we got to jump back into the C++. And so navigating back and forth between that has definitely been a lot. And so ChatGPT has been a huge help there. Not to necessarily answer it for you, because then you'll never learn. Don't just say do this. But say hey, can you explain what does, I'm just going to use a super basic example, what does the const keyword mean? What does this mean? What does that mean? How can I use it to do this particular thing? Or what's going wrong here where various debugging steps, the more you can learn from your mistakes, the better it goes. And so ChatGPT is like that one friend that not only knows everything, but is not a know-it-all about it, which is really nice.
Yeah, ChatGPT knows a lot, but it's not very smart.
Yeah. And sometimes it will lie to you, so like trust but verify. Don't be afraid to like Google search afterwards and like actually look up the docs, because ChatGPT is great. It's a great starting point for the Explain Like I'm 5, but once you're a little bit more familiar with it, the docs are definitely the way to go to actually like learn something new.
All right, thank you so much.
I had this is a question for all four of you. It's not very specific, but it's like, do you have any advice for like standing out, like making your resume stand out, or your personal project standing out?
I will talk for me personally, because when I was looking at a lot of resumes that junior analysts were sending, like they say online, keep keep your CV in one page, and that's really, at least for me, it's really important because I don't have time to go through multiple pages and like find the important information there. I just have like so much time to look through dozens of resumes. So one page, at least for me, is a must, and I heard a lot of similar opinions. I don't know if people will agree or not. Other things is definitely projects that you are working on your free time. Like, it doesn't matter what, but I want to see that you have a passion, and that you can do, like you are interested in something and you're pursuing, not just I'm not saying that just staying at home and watching Netflix the whole day is a bad thing, but
Hey, they're playing League here. Thank you.
playing League is good if you're applying to Riot. Maybe watching Netflix is good if you're applying to Netflix. So, but what I'm looking for is some passion, to see that you are passionate about something and doing something extra for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so to add on to that, with your resume, when you're kind of adding in whether the projects you've worked on or any relevant work experience, I haven't had as much kind of resume viewing experience as Andrew's had, but I think one thing that kind of stuck out to me when I was formulating my resume was the person looking through your resume, they can kind of get maybe perhaps a glimpse of like what end goal you're working towards, but sometimes you want to list out like if there's like some sort of measurable impact or some sort of metric that can show them or it can quantify to them how well you achieve that end goal. And so it's like kind of what was it, like what you did, how you did it, and like what impact it achieved, and like really kind of focusing on that, then they can show like, oh, okay, this is kind of the impact you had.
Thank you.
Just a quick thing too. One of my friends is the recruiter that my team actually uses at work, and I think the biggest thing that I learned from her, I was like, how long do you look at people's resumes? 20 seconds. That's how long your resume has to like make an impression. So obviously standing out is really important as you go further in the process, but I don't know about y'all, I had a really hard time with the resume screening a lot of the time. Make sure that whatever is in the job description and is applicable to that job is at the top of your resume and easy to find. Because they will look at it for 20 seconds, and if you don't have the skill that they think you need for the job, you're done, and you never even get to do the interviews, where having those projects and having those passions matters.
Also, sometimes be concise, because if you put a lot of words, it's very hard to find what you actually was working on, and also it shows that you cannot be concise. So I'm not saying the resume should be short, but at least it should literally just contain the important information.
Right. Thank you.
I have two questions. First of all, thank you guys for coming out here today. I know it's Sunday, you guys just want to chill in your home. So first question is more addressed to Andrew. You mentioned that back in Russia, people use some more creative solutions that are not sometimes right, but in your transition from working from Russia to the US, did you bring any of these creative solutions, or did you adapt like the new mindset to work with?
So Riot, as I was working at Riot, was still an American company. So working at Riot in Russia is not very different from working at Riot here. When I was working in a Russian company, we definitely had like a very different approach to a lot of stuff, like even analytics. For example, we were very conscious about like what data about players' behavior do we store and analyze. Riot kind of doesn't do this job, and it just stores everything, so you can find everything about. By everything, I mean whatever people do in the games. But because of that, there are other problems, like because Riot stores everything, it becomes much harder to find the information, or the queries take longer, and you wait for longer. So it's not very different. It's just like minor things about how do you approach things. And here it's like, oh, we can hire a contractor to solve this problem, or we can hire this company to do this for us. In Russia, it was, how can we solve it with what we have? I think these days, gaming companies are coming to this mindset, maybe even IT companies coming to this mindset, because you see there are like a lot of layoffs happening, and people trying to do the same with less power and with less people.
Thank you. Second question is more to the board. You guys mentioned a lot how personal projects and personal ambition go side and side. When you try to upgrade to a new position, do you do personal projects on the side just to prove people within the company, like, this is what I want to do, this is what I know? Is this like an actual frequent occurrence or not?
I mean, for me, I'm actually in the process of like trying to get promoted, but at least in my experience, Riot is really only looking at like my current work at Riot. But that's not to say that necessarily you're not doing kind of extra. Like I mentioned, when I switched from data engineering to software engineering, I had to do my regular day job and also learn the other stuff on the side. I also, I actually had to do the interview for software engineering before I could make the swap. Granted, a little bit less pressure because it was like an internal interview, but it was still the same interview that you would get if you were coming in not having worked at the company. And so I would say outside personal projects are less necessary, but there is still like personal learning that is really important.
So at Riot, I am actually a co-strike team lead for partnerships for Riot Unidos, our Latin ERG. And so I help run like night market and different events on campus. And while that is technically extracurricular per se, and not really, it's outside of my job, I do most of that work outside of my job. Me and my manager work out that the skills that I am gaining by project managing those types of things do actually go into consideration, at least for me, in my reviews, because project management is a part of my core work skills. So while technically I'm doing it not really on work hours per se, it does go into consideration as leveling up skills that are needed within my main career.
Yeah, I would say for me, having spent a better part of 3 years figuring out how games break and also how they break certain requirements, it has kind of led me to be naturally curious about like how games are made. So kind of in my free time, I've kind of dabbled with entry-level game development, if only just to better understand perhaps like certain thought process, or like if a certain project or developer is doing something a certain way that's causing issues, why are they doing it that way? And by essentially copying their footsteps, albeit in a very like butchered elementary way, you can better communicate with them, intent. There's less, kind of miscommunication or misunderstanding, and that ends up improving the overall compliance QA process as a title is trying to get released onto like a console platform.
For analysts, for example, at Riot, we have a very structured set of rules for each level of analyst, like what requirements, what set of skills you need to have. And I think starting at the senior level, you stop needing hard skills, like nobody cares about how good you are at SQL or Python. Actually, people just assume that you're good if you're there. And then there's a lot how you give back to the community, like within Riot, how are you contributing to analysts department in general. So again, it's not what you do outside of work, everything they only look at what you do at work. But this is not your direct responsibilities. This is how you communicate with the rest of the company.
Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Hello, two questions. Is that okay? Okay, so first question. Do you use NumPy or SQL?
SQL.
Wait.
Also NumPy, but for
Both.
different things.
Oh, so if so, what are the operational differences between the two, and what do you use like one over the other for what situations?
So we don't actually, and Andrew's team might be different. We usually don't use SQL directly. We'll use PySpark SQL, which is sort of a Python library built around SQL. It uses a lot of the same sort of terminology, but in like Python syntax. So it's pretty transferable between the two. NumPy is more for like mathematical things, rather than SQL is more for like data aggregation and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I would add that I use both, and the biggest differentiator for me, if it's something complex, then I go with PySpark for sure, because it's just more controllable. But if it's just a simple select, then I'll go with SQL because it's just simpler. The syntax is much simpler.
Okay. Wait, PySpark? PySpark works with NumPy, right? PySpark extracts the data from SQL so that NumPy can interpret it, right? Or no?
I mean,
We don't use NumPy as much to interpret or work with the data.
Okay.
It's mostly for like functionality that you might not have with SQL directly. So
I
that
see.
exists more within the Python space.
And one more question. About Vanguard. How do you ensure that Vanguard is private, safe, and reliable if it has root-level access to our OS?
None of us work on Vanguard, so
Oh,
I
okay.
don't really have an answer for you there.
Thank you for your time.
Hello. Something a different question is kind of about mentality. To me, it's like, yes, I'm into video games, but whenever I work on these stuff, I often have times that my own compassion and expectations are way higher than my actual skills. So especially to me for the game industry, yes, it is wild because how many opportunities there are, but also it is very going to be turbulent because how many people there are, and there's a lot of possibility going on. So I'm more curious on definitely I wasn't here on the first, but I know how many people kind of when they're at their low, what pushes you through those low times, keep on committing, pushing you through. Because yes, people measure your success through what you actually achieve, but I'm more curiously about the goal, behind, those minds, what keeps you going.
I think for me, I keep in mind that I'm probably gonna keep getting better at things. So if I, create something that doesn't meet my expectations or meet my goals, and this is for external projects, not as much work projects, because you kind of have to meet the goals there. But when I'm not meeting what my expectations are, I don't mind putting it aside temporarily because I know that my skills will get better. And so if I come back and revisit it, I can maybe do it justice the next time or the next time. And eventually you'll get good enough that you'll be able to achieve your vision. But also sometimes you can't do it alone. So sometimes you also need to ask for help.
Thank you.
I mean, also you need to survive and you need money. So, and to earn money, you need to do your job. So that's kind of pushes you to.
Sometimes
to do
good
better.
enough is enough too. Like it might not be exactly what you want it to be. And I've had this issue actually with one of my projects where like I was really pushing to make it more efficient and make it like do all these things. And my manager was like, we don't need to do that. And you don't need to push so hard to make it do that. We're going for a slower goal, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think small digestible chunks, so that way you're hitting milestones along the way, makes you feel a lot more like you are going someplace, rather than having a giant daunting goal and you're like, I have to hit that thing. It just makes it easier, at least on my brain, to break it down a little bit more.
Thank you.
Love your outfit, by the way.
Hey.
Hello. This question probably been more referred to Tara Ray, but since they're not here, if anyone with knowledge of the subject could help me out. I'm interested in narrative craft and writing, but looking at the gaming industry recently, I've come to be more realistic about standards. So I was wondering, at least with Riot Games, are there any positions with transferable skills in that position, or?
I actually have two friends who were, I think, 2 years above me in school, and they're in writing positions. So it's not impossible. I think in the writing space in particular, there are a lot of contract positions to start. So don't be afraid of like taking maybe a contract position or working at a company that contracts out to other companies, because that can also like transition into a bigger full-time job. But unfortunately, yeah, I don't know much about writing beyond my friends' experiences.
I would say look into localization. There are a lot of games that are, especially in the Japanese games sphere, that are created overseas and need writers for those localizations. And I know teams like Keywords especially specializes in localization, and I know that they have branches all over the country with everything between full-time and contract positions. So that would definitely be a good foot in the door for writing, especially like dialogue and stuff like items and item descriptions, menus, that can definitely get you at least some experience.
Thank you very much.
All right, I guess that marks the end of the Q&A session. Thank you so much for all your insights and answers. I definitely learned a lot. I'm sure everyone else in the audience did. Can we please have a huge round of applause for our panelists?
Thank you for having us here. Thank you for having us here.
Of course, it was a fantastic experience. But that pretty much marks the end of our Technology at Riot panel. And we have 1 more hour left at TGEX, so I hope everyone in the audience goes ahead and enjoys the rest of the experience. And yeah, thank you so much for coming.